Welcome to Phoenix Masonry Live. Because of scheduling reasons, our first show has been pre-recorded. Here you will first see a history and description of this show's motto, Celebrating Freemasonry, by its creator, Frederic Milliken, my co-host, and with guest co-host, Greg Stewart, followed by an explanation of U.S. railroad orders with an accompanying artifact from our museum's collection. Finally, we will end with a discussion of Frederic Milliken's social work within Freemasonry, and that with various Masonic artists. We want to take this opportunity to thank the online show, the Masonic Roundtable, for having me as their guest on their episode number 135 on the fascinating history of Le Droit Humain. Thank you very much for inviting me, and enjoy the show. Welcome to Phoenix Masonry Live.
This is a show about Masonic museum artifacts featuring
interviews, Masonic history,
and lots more. I'm Greg Stewart, better known perhaps as Masonic Traveler on the web and the publisher of FreemasonInformation.com. And this is Elena Llamas, who is the Director of Public Relations for Phoenix Masonry, and we're here to
celebrate
Freemasonry. This week, I'm here as the guest host to talk to the program's regular host, Fred Milliken, about celebrating Freemasonry. How are you doing, Fred? Long time no talk.
I'm pumped.
I believe it. This is a great program that you two have put together, and I think there's a lot of energy behind it, and so far, from what I've seen, it's been really great. But I think the important thing to start this program off with is talking about celebrating Freemasonry, what it means, and how you got your inspiration for it. So where did it come from?
It involves thinking big, inspiring people, motivating people, instilling pride. When you have an organization and you instill pride in it, members of the organization want to go out and bring other people in, and it's a snowball effect. And the organization grows naturally from its own superior being.
We couldn't agree more, Fred. And tell us about the start of this concept for you personally. You have a very interesting personal history. Your mother used to work at Bookman Tavern, which has a lot of Paul Revere history happening there. Could you tell us about that?
And that's in Lexington, Massachusetts, where the first battle of the American Revolution was fought in 1775. And my mother had a weekend job where she was at the Buckman Tavern as a historical narration for tourists that came in. And I can remember sitting out on the steps and listening to her talk about the first battle of the American Revolution and Paul Revere riding into Lexington in the early morning hours of April 19th, 1775, with the British are coming, the British are coming. Which is really probably the regulars are coming. But we all know it the other way.
So from there, you joined Demolay?
Yes, Demolay, and became master counselor. And that was a major step to me understanding what Freemasonry was all about.
Yes, we have a couple pictures.
Yes.
We have we have a couple pictures of your Demolay times. Do you want to tell us about these?
Yes, that's my installation on January 23rd, 1964.
Wow.
And I'm on the right there, as you're looking at it, the right middle.
Wow, would this be you?
That would be me.
Oh, look at that. Sharp eye. I did not know that ahead of time. And this is your diploma?
That's my diploma, and I don't know if you can see a date, but it's 1959 when I took my degrees in Demolay.
Awesome.
Wow. That's a neat bit of history to have on hand like that. Is that something that's floating around the house? You have those framed, looks like they're framed up on the wall.
Yes, they're framed on the wall, along with a whole bunch of other stuff.
So, and in that time, I don't know if you mentioned it, but you were the ritual degree team winner?
Yes, we had a state competition. I was senior counselor at the time, and we entered the state competition and won it. It took us, through many competitions to get there, but we won it. And, you know, that's really another aspect of celebrating Freemasonry, because when we came out of there, I mean, we were walking on the air. We were so proud of ourselves and our organization that Battle Green Chapter Order of DeMolay in Lexington, Massachusetts became one of the premier DeMolay chapters in the state and grew so rapidly. And I could see that one of the reasons that it grew was its pride in what they had accomplished.
Yeah. What do you think was different about then than now? So obviously time, but what do you think, why do you think that there was a lot more interest in it then perhaps than today? Not to say that DeMolay is just the sole topic of conversation of interest, but you talk about there being a tremendous amount of pride. Not to say that there's not pride in people who are doing it now, but do you think that there's a difference in the time?
I think that the times are different. The culture is different. The emphasis is different. The rise of computers and computer games and information technology. We're in a whole different world, and that is not conducive to Freemasonry and DeMolay getting people too large, you know.
Yeah. Well, and that takes us to part of the tasks that you had when you went to Paul Revere Lodge, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, first though, I'd say Plymouth Lodge started it all off. This Celebrating Freemasonry really started becoming a theme with me and Plymouth Lodge. And what I did was, when I became master, I was also a member of Paul Revere Lodge. I was the senior deacon of Paul Revere Lodge while I was master in Plymouth Lodge. And at Plymouth Lodge, I invited the Paul Revere Colonial Degree Team, which I had joined, to come to Plymouth Lodge. And what happened was, I put out the word, and this lodge says, well, we'd like to come and bring 10 or 15 members. And I said, okay. And then another lodge says, well, we'd like to come and bring 20 or 25 members. And then a lodge from Rhode Island says, we'd like to come and bring our district deputy. And then they all said, I had 5 district deputies. I had a lodge packed with about 150 people, and I had to hire a cop to manage the traffic outside and help park all the cars. And after I did that, that was the beginning. I said, I got to do this more often. This is really good, you know. And that came to how Celebrating Freemasonry really developed. And then I went to Paul Revere Lodge, and one of the things that Paul Revere Lodge provided was a budget for their master. So I had a vision. I developed this vision in Plymouth Lodge, and then I took this vision to Paul Revere Lodge that had some money available for the master to put on programs. And I said,
wonderful. You have to have money.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's a big part of it, having the revenue to do these things. But go ahead.
Oh yeah.
I had this vision, and I had developed it in Plymouth Lodge, and there were a couple of other activities which we don't need to go into that I did at Plymouth Lodge. But in Paul Revere Lodge, I was really able to take this vision to its utmost degree.
So in Paul Revere Lodge, you have the Colonial Degree Team, right? You did a lot of work with the Colonial Degree Team. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, the Colonial Degree Team was developed in 1776 in response to the country's bicentennial, and was supposed to be a one-year project, but it became so popular that it stayed on and on and on. And we did a lot with that degree team and went many different places. As master, I took it to some interesting places. One of them was Putnam Lodge in Connecticut, and the story behind that was I had a elderly woman in my church who had to sell her house that had been in her family for 3 generations and go to assisted living. And when she was cleaning out, or having people clean out her basement, she found a Masonic diploma, and it came from Connecticut. So working through channels, I was able to find the lodge, and I asked them if they would like to receive this back, and they said, oh, that sounds wonderful. So I brought a delegation down. We rented one of those 15 or 20 passenger vans, and we took off, and we went to Putnam, Connecticut, and we presented them with a diploma. And while I was there, I said, we do a colonial degree team. How would you like to have us back to do that? And 6 months later, they had us back.
So this team, you had members of your lodge actually enacting or pretending to be historical characters, right? Tell us some of the personalities that you had on the team.
Well, you had, Paul Revere and George Washington, and all the big names. I won't go through all of them, but when I became a member of the team, I had no names left, and so I researched. There really was all the good names were gone. So I researched through the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, and I asked them if there were any Masons present at April 19th, 1775, when Paul Revere rode into town and the battle ensued. And they said, amazing to me, because there was no Masonic lodge in Lexington at the time, and there were about 70 patriots that were on the Lexington Green at the time to do battle, and of those, some 26 were Freemasons. I chose William Monroe, proprietor of Monroe Tavern in the town of Lexington, and he was on an all-night vigil from April 18th through the night into the morning of April 19th to warn people if the Lexington Minutemen, if the British had come into town, and he did that because they did. And so years later, William Monroe was to go to the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, and he received a charter for Lexington's first lodge, which met at the Monroe Tavern for over 40 years. And he received that charter from Most Worshipful Paul Revere.
Wow.
And so we did some other things with the colonial degree team and with things at Paul Revere Lodge. I took the lodge, the colonial degree team, back to Lexington, Massachusetts, Simon W. Robinson Lodge, from whence, of course, I was in DeMolay. And that was like returning home. And we did a very unique program, because we did an exemplification of the third degree by the colonial degree team. And then we had a tri-table lodge. Now, that's the first one I know of. And that's Lexington, and that's the three masters. Yeah, a table lodge generally has, one lodge does it, and it has a master and the two wardens and a horseshoe. On a horseshoe at the end of the table are the two wardens, and the master's in the middle. We petitioned the Grand Lodge to do a tri-table lodge. The first I know of it. It might have been done by somebody else, but I don't think so. So that we could do three at one time. So we had three masters in the east, and three senior wardens in west, and three junior wardens in the south. And we performed that table lodge. The two things were done together. So we started on a Saturday at 4 p.m. and we finished at 11 o'clock at night. That was
awesome.
That was one of the things we did.
What about the kill-winning degree team?
Yeah, having your own degree team is wonderful, and we did perform at our own lodge. But this thing about celebrating Freemasonry, and what could be better than to invite another degree team in, and the kill-winning degree team in kilts, a drummer, bagpiper, marching into lodge. They did what we do, the last two sections of the third degree, and when they were all done. You see that altar in front of you there. They gathered around the altar and held hands and sang "Auld Lang Syne."
And that's you in the master's chair, right?
That's me in the master's chair. That's correct. We also did a Masonic roast. And we had in our lodge a man that was the Don Rickles of Freemasonry. I mean, he could cut you down. At the same time, you knew it was all love. And so I decided to do a Masonic roast. Again, I don't know if anybody else has done Masonic roast, but we tattooed this guy blue. It was so funny. We had people rolling in the aisles. And I had a head table so large that we had to have, and I'm not seeing those pictures on the screen, Elena.
Oh, I thought these were the...
Okay, now I see them.
Okay.
I want to make sure our viewers see this. I had head table so big, I had to capture it in 2 separate pictures. That's it. That's it. And then, you know, another thing I did to celebrate our Freemasonry Power Via Lodge is we honored our Colonial Degree Team founder with a special, there it is. I rented the top floor of a pub that had been in existence since 1775, a working pub, and we had a dinner there, and we had speeches, and we had lots of libation. Yep. And we just celebrated him, and that was really good. And that's really celebrating your Freemasonry. And you know,
what about the
ladies?
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
You were going to
ask.
Yeah,
I was going to ask you.
I know.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the ladies' night barbershop chorus.
I knew that. Another way to celebrate our Freemasonry, I was required to put on a lodge 2 ladies' nights, one in the lodge and one outside the lodge, which would be a dinner out. And this was inside the lodge, and I hired a women's barbershop chorus as entertainment after dinner. And look how many women are there.
Wonderful.
And they were just super. I mean, talk about celebrating your Freemason. We had the whole crowd, and this is in the basement of the lodge, and you have tables and chairs you can't see, but we had the whole place packed.
This really has the tones of almost like a church activities. So you know how active churches, I have weekly events or visiting folks. I mean, these seem like big productions. These aren't let me pull a rabbit out of the hat and make it happen. These are planned. These are extensive.
Yes. And like I say, I had a budget to work with, and so I was able to take my vision and put it into practice. You know, there's a lot of things you can do that, you know, don't cost a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, with money, you can do it up really proud. So
from there, then you went to the Grand Lodge of Texas. Am I understanding correctly? Or what was the evolution of that brought you down south?
Well, the evolution actually was
work.
Yeah, no, actually, in the winter of 2003 to 2004, we had 3 snowstorms in a row. And they were all 12 inches or more within 10 days. So within 10 days, we had 3 feet of snow. I had to get up on the roof of my house and shovel my roof off. It took me 5 hours because the snow might collapse the roof in. It took me 5 hours to shovel the roof off. When I was done, I walked off the roof. Just walked off. I went in the house and said, honey, that's it. We're moving south. Not doing it anymore.
And then you went over to the most worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Texas.
Right. And I have a lot of good times. I have a lot of good things to say about it because we do a lot of interesting things too. But instead of celebrating Freemasonry on the local lodge level, they seem to do it more through the Grand Lodge. And I think we have some pictures. We did a rooftop raising, and you know, I have a picture of me standing there, and then I think there's a picture of the altar, and we're up high on a roof. Well, I don't know, we're up about 5 stories, and in the background you can see the Big D, Dallas.
Yeah.
We weren't taking pictures of the degree, but we took some pictures.
Is it a Southern thing to have so many outdoor degrees? Because not to diminish that outdoor rooftop degree, but you recently went to a aircraft carrier for a degree. That's just sort of a thing.
Yeah, that's the Grand Lodge of Texas rather than the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Texas.
Yep.
But no, yeah, it is. I think it is. They do a lot of this stuff. So
lots of big sky, and don't worry about looking for a picture for that just off. Oh,
I have it right here. I have it right here. This is the
Blue Ghost, the USS Lexington aircraft carrier. And I took that picture at night after we finished with the degree, and I was departing the ship. I'm sorry, it's a ship. And don't call it.
No, not a boat.
It's a boat to the rest of us landlubbers. That's okay.
Yeah, and then the degree team, and then the first picture that you show was me with Most Worshipful Wendell P. Miller after the degree. And so I got a picture taken with the Grand Master. You know, there's other things that we did to celebrate Freemasonry. I think the biggest thing we did as a lodge was our trip to Bloomington, Indiana. I don't have any pictures of that, I don't think, but for a year as master, and I was there for 2 years, but I took the second year trying to get us into Bloomington, Indiana, because that was my wife's hometown. That's where she was born and raised.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't bring it off, but I eventually did after I left the East. And we flew 18 members in a plane out to Indiana. Past Worshipful Master picked us up, brought us out to dinner at a shrine club, and then billeted us at the Demolay Chalet, and then brought us in for breakfast the next morning. So we flew in on a Friday night, Friday afternoon, and Saturday morning, they brought us in for breakfast at the lodge, and we did a tour of Bloomington. Saturday night, we did the degree. Sunday morning, we went back to the lodge for breakfast again, and then departed and went home. So, you know, it was like a weekend excursion for us, but boy, was it that we've never gone that far. That was at least a 1,000-mile trip. And another thing that I did personally about celebrating Freemasonry was I was invited by Stephen Defoe and John Hayes, brothers in Alberta, Canada, and John Hayes put me up in his house, so I have many thanks to give to him. Invited me to Alberta, Canada for a speaking tour and paid for me and my wife the airfare and the lodging that we had to do as we toured. And Stephen Defoe made a CD of the pictures, and that's the outside cover of the CD, and shows you the date in 2005 and the towns that we went to, Hinton, Edmonton, and Jasper. And on the back, it shows you the 2 papers that I wrote for the occasion, World Peace Through Brotherhood and Native American Rituals and Their Influence on Freemasonry. And
Fascinating.
I presented those, and those were papers of about an hour talking. They were lengthy papers.
Wow.
And that was really a joy for us. And
what is this, Fred? What is this South Park, Fred?
This is the creation of Stephen Defoe, who thought that he could make me into South Park, and that's Fred, Worshipful Master,
Worshipful South Park Fred.
The other thing that we haven't mentioned, I think that's worth mentioning, is that I became involved with Masonic drama club, and we performed a play by Carl Claudy called A Rose Upon the Altar.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very emotional play, and I had one of the principal parts called, his name was Squire Bentley, and for years I was on the internet without using my name. I used Squire Bentley. I used it because in many jurisdictions, and including my own, Grand Lodges did not like Freemasons forming websites and commenting on Freemasons.
Personas. Was this before or after you moved to Prince Hall?
The Rose Upon the Altar? No, it was
when you were using the Squire Bentley nom de plume.
Oh, it was way before. I started out with it when I first started out, perhaps in the late 1990s. I didn't get my first computer till somewhere around 1998.
Well, we touched upon this topic a little bit with Demolay at the start of this show, but this leads us into another topic about the early internet and the early Masonic forums. And you have lots to say about this, Frederic, from experience. Do you want to share some light with us about it?
Yes. The that's where I really got my start on you know, what I was going to write about, because I essentially became a writer, and these were reform movements, basically. We talked on forums about how to make Freemasonry better. And the first forum I started out with in the late 1990s was Masonic Light, and that was created by Jeff Naylor, and one of its participants was Chris Hodap. That's before Chris became really well known.
Wow, what year was this?
1998.
Wow.
Right. And that eventually petered out, and I went to the lodgeroom.com. Stephen Defoe was on that Masonic Light too, and so he brought me over to the lodgeroom.com and made me a moderator there. And that's where I ran into Theron Dunn, who was a Californian Mason who had his own website and was very vocal about some things. And we got into major disagreements or debates on a brotherly basis. I mean, we loved each other, but we didn't see things exactly the same way. And so I started writing, and he wrote. We wrote articles back and forth. And when the lodgeroom.com started to peter out, I went over to mastermason.com and became a moderator there, and another forum. And that's where I met Grayson Mayfield from South Carolina. And he was like Theron Dunn. I mean, we got it, you know, back into discussions again. So it was very interesting. It kind of started my Masonic writing career.
Yeah.
Yes, Frederic is opinionated. He thinks he's got the free and the free thinking and Freemasonry. Well, we have a treat for you here at Phoenix Masonry Live. We want to vary the show a little bit and show you different things. As a Masonic museum and library, phoenixmasonry.org has an extensive museum artifact collection, and most of it is Masonic, and some of it is Masonic theme related. And so we have begun a series of Phoenix Masonry Live Masonic Artifact Series, and we are going to show you the first one right now. Welcome to the first installment of Phoenix Masonry Live's Masonic Artifact Series. I am Elena Llamas, Director of Public Relations for Phoenix Masonry.
And I am Frederic L. Milliken, Executive Director of Phoenix Masonry.
And today, we're going to talk to you about this wonderful piece from the late 1800s, early 1900s. We believe it belonged to a railroad fraternal society because of this beautiful marble lantern that hangs under it. The pin is called a stick pin because it could be easily hung on the long collar of a dinner jacket.
Our founding president received this railroad pin from the original family that owned it, but neither he nor they know where it originates from or what order it belonged to.
The upper part of the pin is hand-hammered out of coin silver. Coin silver has a pure silver content of about 90%, and it has an added alloy, usually copper. Sterling silver has a pure silver content of around 92.5%, with also an alloy added to it, usually copper. Now, the reason why coin silver is usually used in jewels like this is because it doesn't tarnish, so it doesn't need to be cleaned. It was also very abundant around the late 1800s, early 1900s when this pin was made. And it was very popular with jewelers back then, and fraternal organizations, lodges, and so forth used it for all their jewelry. We can see here a moon, star, clouds, and under it is what is called a ribbon bar. A ribbon bar once held a silk ribbon that hung beneath the lantern in this case. This ribbon would have had the name of the order, the lodge, the chapter, or even the name of the individual. Silk ribbons almost never survive the test of time, so unfortunately, we don't have that information.
If you found this interesting, we have on our website, phoenixmasonry.org, a number of railroad fraternal pins. And they are varied in nature from many different orders and beautiful. When the railroad brotherhoods were formed, they often used a quasi-Masonic lodge structure to include organizing themselves in lodges, using a secret ritual of initiation, recognition signs, passwords, and grips. And some even wore regalia such as collarettes. They operated as fraternal societies that offered death benefits, life insurance, and social activities, and often were temperance societies. The big four of the railroad brotherhoods were the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, founded on May 8, 1863 in Marshall, Michigan, the Order of Railroad Conductors, founded on December 15, 1867 in Amboy, Illinois, the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen, founded on December 1st, 1873 in Port Jervis, New York, and the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen, founded on September 23rd, 1883 in Oneonta, New York. Scrolling down, we see some membership cards. One, a membership card of the Order of Railway Conductors, circa 1888. And then a membership card of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen, circa 1878. Further down, we will get to view some very detailed engineers' membership records. These detailed plaques remind us somewhat of Masonic trestle boards. And that's not the only thing that has a Masonic reminder for us here. The Brotherhood of Locomotive Firemen and Engine Men had a ritual ceremony, an opening ceremony, a prayer ceremony, closing ceremony, initiation ceremony, some very involved ritual, some of which was somewhat like Freemasonry. On our site, you will see mostly Freemasonry information and artifacts, but we also have a lot of other fraternal organizations represented. And we have a chronological establishment of fraternal organizations in America. The very first, of course, is Freemasonry, that was formed in 1733. But there are many others, among them the Sons of Liberty, the Society of Red Men, Actors' Order of Friendship, Rosicrucians, the Knights of Pythias, Order of Native Americans, Daughters of Liberty, Catholic Knights of America, the Loyal Order of Moose, the Woodmen of the World, and many, many others.
We would like to invite our viewers, if you have any information in a pin like this, please contact us at phoenixmasonry.org. We would love to hear from you. And thank you for joining us for this first installment of Phoenix Masonry Live Masonic Artifact Series.
That's all until next time, when we will be back with another artifact.
So let's talk a little bit, Fred. You started mentioning your earlier work on the internet with involvements. I don't think that we got to some of your writings with Stephen Defoe on the fourth part of A Circle, the Masonic magazine that Defoe put out quite some time ago.
Yeah, I started there, and then of course he morphed that into Masonic Magazine. And I did a number of stories. I had a regular column. I mean, Defoe is one of the big influences in my Masonic life, because he taught me how to write it better, how to write it more concise.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, just to pick out one story that I did from Masonic Magazine, I traveled up into Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and I visited the Oklahoma Native American degree team. And
Awesome.
I did a whole story on them, and let me see if I can just grab a picture here. I don't know if we can post it.
Don't worry about it. Oh, yeah, you can show it on the camera. I will show.
Yeah.
Definitely just hold it up. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we can see it.
That one on the web. Mm-hmm.
And that's the degree team, the Oklahoma Native American degree team. And it was a fascinating interview and a fascinating story.
Well, then you got into Phoenix Masonry. You are executive director and my co-host here on this Phoenix Masonry show. Tell us about the early work you did with Phoenix Masonry.
Well, one of the things I did when I came on board was to suggest to our president, David Letelier, I said, David, we need a Facebook page. We need to expand from just being a .org into more active participation in social media.
Do you remember the year?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
But
Okay.
it's been some time. I mean, this is going back quite a ways. I mean, we're not talking in recent times. This goes back 5+, maybe close to 10 years.
Yeah, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 8. And after I got us on Facebook and set up the page, I said to David, why don't we go on Twitter also? And so we went on Twitter, and then Rebel Mouse, and we had a great presence on social media, which when Elena came on board, she developed even more. I mean, we're on everything now, from, Instagram, Reddit, the whole works. The other thing I did was I put in a Prince Hall section on the site, on the main website, and I have a very interesting video there. It's the video of Grand Master in Washington, who recognized Prince Hall in the 1890s for 1 year.
Oh, we'll link it below in the info section of this video.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that afterwards they rescinded it, and he said, well, you cannot put a marker on my grave until the two Grand Lodges get back together again. And in the 1990s, when they got together, they had a special ceremony. That was William Upton, Most Worshipful William Upton.
Yeah, I think you can find him if you Google the story, or just Google the names and Freemasonry. I think you can you'll be able to find it fairly easily. I remember watching that video. It's quite the presentation, very well attended, but even back to what Phoenix Masonry was doing by adding a Prince Hall section, that was, I hate to use the word revolutionary, but that was something that didn't exist on the web to a big degree at the time. Right. So this was really embodying the spirit of Freemasonry, its inclusive spirit, or the inclusive side of its spirit, let's say, and giving it a voice in a medium that didn't really have that, or at least hadn't been directly recognized. I mean, obviously an issue of recognition that we could probably fall into a deep discussion on, but Phoenix Masonry embraced that and brought it into the fold. And I wonder, was that in part because of your connections with Prince Hall Masonry, or did you just see that as like a missing piece of the puzzle that needed to be included?
Well, what we were trying to do here at Phoenix Masonry was become universal and become incorporative of all Masonic Grand Lodges and orders, so that it wasn't just about mainstream Freemasonry. It was about other orders in Freemasonry. And I would go on to point out that one of the other things that I was able to do was fill out the paperwork for our 501c3. And in doing so, we became a nonprofit organization, and we're now able to receive tax donations that you can deduct from your taxes.
Hey, that's actually an interesting point that I'd like to spend a little bit more time on. In doing that and becoming a nonprofit, did you find the ability or reach of the website to change it all? So rather than being a single entity venture or just a thing that someone's pulled together, did you find that legitimizing it into a nonprofit gave it a different voice or a different degree of recognition, or have things essentially stayed the same? How has that changed the work?
Absolutely. I think it has changed us, and I don't know if it's legitimized us. I think we were very legitimate from the beginning, but it gave us a basis from which to talk to the donor society and to talk to other people that are in the nonprofit business, and to talk to people about the good works that we do and the education that we provide, and to put us on a worldwide scale where people everywhere could see what we're doing more. I think that's what it did for us.
It also, if I may add, Frederic, on a personal level, but I think I speak for you too, it has put in the back of our heads a greater connection to other museums, Masonic and otherwise, and because now we are, behaving, you have to remember that you're representing a nonprofit museum organization, and there's lots of museums, as you know, on every single topic you can think of, and so it has linked us to that culture more, I believe.
That's another interesting topic that we could probably delve down. But the idea of there being a Masonic museum, are there many in the United States? I mean, is there one in every state, like a research lodge, or are they few and far between? And so does that put Phoenix Masonry in a position to carry that flag, if you will, to represent Freemasonry that way?
Well, I think there are fewer than there should be, for sure. And you're familiar with lodge displays, in the front room of the lodges. There's many museum exhibitions in different places. But as Frederic was mentioning, Phoenix Masonry looks to be a broad institution, and so we do carry, as you saw in the video, artifacts from other related Masonic and like the railroad orders, Masonic related fraternal institutions. And so, Fred, do you want to comment on this?
Well, I know my Prince Hall Grand Lodge has a museum and library, but it's confined to Prince Hall and basically to Texas. But we are universal worldwide. We represent more than just Prince Hall. We represent mainstream. We represent other orders in Freemasonry, and we represent other fraternal organizations. I mean, just think of the Odd Fellows and some of the other. I mean, we could go on and on and on, but we're more inclusive on a grand scale than being confined to one state or one Grand Lodge.
And we make all our archives and artifacts available online too. So we are global. You can log right into our or go right to our website and see our artifacts right there. And we also display artifacts from related museums there too, which is, it makes us even broader. So yes, it's not your typical Masonic museum. I think most are like Fred was describing. It's from an institution. Prince Hall was the example given, from a state given, and then you can go even more locally into each lodge having an exhibition. We tried to bring all that together, all the different branches of the reputable, established, non-charlatan Freemasonries into one place, and the related orders and historical orders. A lot of history in Phoenix Masonry.
And now I'd like to move into what Greg has so viciously labeled as public work. Confronting the injustices in the fraternity, because I have a beloved past master in my lodge at Prince Hall, and he says, he calls me a muckraker, and I said, well, I do a lot of other stuff. He says, yeah, but I love you best when you're doing your muckraking.
Yes, and Frederic is referencing, we do have an outline here, so that we have a general idea of everything we want to cover and not go off in all kinds of directions. So yes, tell us about some of the injustices you have fought within Freemasonry, Fred.
Well, we have first of all, Derek Gordon from the Grand Lodge of Arkansas, and if you
Wait,
read,
Fred, not to interrupt you, but just maybe it's worthwhile to just sort of illustrate why maybe these injustices or so-called injustices take place, or why they've occurred, and just how they exist. So before we get to the depth of these in particular, why do you think some of these things, or why do you think there are injustices in a society that is supposed to be without injustice?
Just is supposed to be just.
Okay, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And in the history of American Freemasonry, Grand Lodges do not have the power they had today. They were more or less overseeing the ceremonial and chartering of a particular area, and left decision-making totally up to local lodges. Today, they have taken over almost 75% of the decision-making that occurs in Freemasonry in a state, and have come out with edicts and regulations that I believe are strangling Freemasonry and creating situations where the more power they grab, the more they use it. And in a lot of cases, they're using it unjustly. And that's not to say that there aren't good, in mainstream Freemasonry and Prince Hall Freemasonry, that there aren't good Grand Lodges in the system that operate without injustice. But you just have to go to Prince Hall recognition and some of the other issues that are involved, religion in Freemasonry, homosexuality in Freemasonry, and you go to some of these issues and you'll find some Grand Lodges that are just, they're rogue. They're really rogue.
It's interesting you should say that, and I know we could probably go on this path quite a bit, which may be better for another day. But I think that you're right, that we're seeing these manifestations of deviations of attitude, or deviations of behaviors, or just questions being asked, even in the slightest, and some of these things coming up and affecting people. So I know we have a list on our outline here of a number of people that have experienced one thing or another, and you started with Derek Gordon, and we could certainly talk about him, though I don't know how deeply we want to get into that. But just through some of these different people that have experienced, that have come public, that have experienced this and been affected, or had something done to them. They've either been ejected or suspended indefinitely. And so things like that. So how have you been involved with these, and how have these individuals come to your knowledge, and what have you done with that knowledge of finding out what's happened to them?
Well, I'd like to mention each of the what I call the big four, and there were others, but just so we get their name and picture in the process. But once I started with one, I found myself beleaguered with people writing me, asking me, can you take up my cause? My Grand Lodge is doing this to me and doing that to me. And not wanting to get typecast, I picked and chose what I thought were the most important injustices across the United States. Derek Gordon was one of the first, and the Grand Lodge of Arkansas was going to expel him for mentioning the license plate situation in Arkansas, which was a Prince Hall license plate that was created for cars and vehicles in the state of Arkansas. It was generic, didn't mention any Grand Lodges or anything, but because it was created by Prince Hall, the Grand Master of Arkansas created it as a clandestine license plate. And it proceeded, Derek Gordon was secretary of his lodge and proceeded to want to expel him. And I did a series of articles, and the first one was called I Resign. And I think, Greg, you'll remember on Freemason Information how popular that article was. I mean, it just resonated. And just to bring a couple of others in, because I think the Victor Marshall story is really, really something to behold.
Yeah.
And I got to meet Derek Gordon in person, and I got to meet Victor Marshall, who the Grand Lodge of Georgia wanted to expel when they found out that the Grand Lodge of Georgia had actually raised a African American, because they had in their constitution and bylaws that only whites could be members.
Point out to us which one of these fine gentlemen here is Victor.
Okay, on the left, the first person is
right next to you.
Right, yeah, right next to me.
Thank you.
I'm right behind Victor Marshall. And what makes it, and here's another picture of the left, the master, who was a master at the time they tried to expel Victor Marshall, and me, and the past master that was feeding me information so I could write my story. But, you know, going back to the dinner photograph, if you look at that, it occurred when I was attending the Philaxis Convention in Atlanta, Georgia, and that's where Gate City Lodge number 2 is, Victor Marshall's lodge. And we were at a hotel for the Philaxis Society Convention. Now, this is all Prince Hall Freemasons. And now we're in Georgia, where Prince Hall is not recognized by the Grand Lodge of Georgia. And so I asked these guys and said, Gate City Lodge, Victor Marshall and Gate City Lodge number 2, let's go out to dinner. And they said, well, why don't we come over to your hotel? And I said, well, my hotel is overloaded with Prince Hall Freemasons. How do you feel about that? They said, oh, that's fine. So they came over and had dinner with us. And some of the Prince Hall Freemasonry asked me, can we join you in dinner? And so this is only one of the tables, but you can see the only African-American that belongs to mainstream Freemasonry is Victor Marshall, the first person on the left.
Wonderful.
The other African-Americans in the picture are not mainstream Freemasonry. They're Prince Hall Freemasonry, as I we all sat around. We had a great time. There was no discussion of your Grand Lodge does this and your Grand Lodge does that. We were brothers, which indicates to me that the problem is at the top. It's not at the local level. Yeah,
it really is the distillation of individuals who are part of the fraternity. Just the fact that they could all sit at the table, and you're right. There's no one's causing a ruckus or having a concern or an issue with whom they're sitting with. I mean, this is probably the image was. You don't have to pull it back up, but the image was probably as cosmopolitan as you can get of individuals,
right?
Which really does seem counterintuitive to this singular ideal of what the Grand Lodge system is suggesting as what should be regular, irregular, clandestine, not clandestine. I mean, it just seems like these are monikers that they're putting on things in order to maintain an established control over who has access to what, when, and where, which again could probably be a whole topic of another conversation.
And if I may interject a little bit of all three of our personal history, all three of us, Greg Stewart, Frederic Milliken, and myself, met at a yearly Prince Hall convention, which I will murder the name if I try, but I'm in a Phyllis and Philaxis convention, and you know, I'm Latino, and I was with these two fine gentlemen, and we had a great time. The brothers there and the Eastern Star sisters were wonderful, and we had a great time. So yes, I agree with what you're saying. The problem, I think, more from the bottom up, it's a common humanity, and we're all in this together. We all love Masonry, obviously, or we wouldn't be doing this. And then the injustices and all of that comes from power. I agree with everything you've been saying.
Okay, getting back to the Big Four, you know, the issue in Georgia with Victor Marshall was the Grand Lodge had a provision in its constitution that it was white only. And that was one thing I wanted to battle. In the case of Mike McCabe in the Grand Lodge of New Jersey, they had a provision in their constitution that said that the Grand Master could do anything he wanted. And that this was one of the I forget the word for it now, the main institutional principles of Freemasonry.
And this was recent history, right, Fred?
No, it's not really recent. It's at least 5 or 6 years ago. And he was expelled, where we saved Victor Marshall, and Derek Gordon resigned. And then you had the case of Duke Bass Fortesque and Corey Bryson in Florida. And there the Grand Master decided that non-Abrahamic religions, the big three, Muslim, Christianity, and Jewish, were the only religions allowed in the Grand Lodge. And since these two gentlemen were going through the degrees and they found out that they didn't belong to one of the three major religions, decided to expel them.
So in addition to involving yourself with these cases, you also have supported specific craftsmen within Masonry. Do you want to tell us about that?
Right. Rather than become a muckraker all the time, I kind of latched on to talent. You know, there's some fantastic Masons out there that have some absolutely wonderful talent in all walks of the arts. I think it first started off with David Naughton Shires, who created the Masonic Art Exchange, and he was in Ireland. But he had this wonderful graphic artist situation and published a newsletter. And some of it was almost comic book like, but it was wonderful. And so I wrote a story on him. And then some of the others just popped in, you know, Patrick Craddock makes aprons. It's like baking from scratch. He you know, this is one of the examples of an apron he makes. He makes many and very different kinds, and they're all handmade beauties. And you can go to him and say, this is what I want on my apron, and he'll custom make it. What a talent. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, you know, I get tingling goosebumps down me when I look at stuff like this. In addition to Patrick Craddock, we have the artist Ryan Flynn. Now, he started out with stained glass windows in his lodge and has morphed into paintings that absolutely put him as one of the premier traditional artists that is a Mason in the United States, if not the world. The guy is absolutely talented person. And then you have Hondo Nakur, and you see him there with me. I visited his lodge with the intervisitation being approved in Texas. Hondo Nakur is a concert pianist and is going for his PhD in music and studying here. He's from Estonia, but he became a Freemason when he came over to the United States here. Actually was raised in the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, which was very interesting. If you ever seen him play Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 3, which is a very, very difficult piece to play from memory, which lasts about an hour.
Wow.
Absolutely stupendous talent. And these talented people, I decided they needed to be brought to the fore. So in addition to my muckraking, I kind of like to feature talented Freemasons. So if there's any other talented Freemasons out there that I don't know about, if you want to get in touch with me, I'd love to write a story about you. I think you are wonderful people. I wish I was so talented.
I know. You know, just looking at the outline and looking at the clock, I know we've probably hit just about the threshold of time that we had set for this. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this conversation to talk about future plans in the celebration of Masonry?
Well, I don't want to leave Jim McBeth out of the conversation, who makes knives, and he's from Texas. But I do want to touch on one brief subject that I think has to do with the decline in membership. And there you see McBeth and his knives. He's a talented person too, and he uses exotic woods in his design. But when I first started in Freemasonry, all Freemasons went to lodge, and that was it. That's pretty much all we had. Starting in the late 1990s, internet Freemasonry started to grow. And as we progressed into the turn of the century, Freemasons went to lodge and were on the internet. Many Freemasons did both. But as we went along and along, they kind of separated, so that now we have really two different types of Freemasonry. We have people that go to lodge, and they have evolved pretty much into people that don't do much on internet Freemasonry. Some do, but a lot of them don't. And then we have the internet Freemasonry, and a lot of them are into the esoteric discussions and education, and they don't go to lodge that often anymore. So when we're talking about Freemasonry decline in membership, we're not really giving the true story, because we're only counting the people that are going to lodge. But the people that are going to lodge are only now 50% of Freemasonry, because the other 50% is in internet Freemasonry only. And they're practicing their Freemasonry online because they're not getting from lodge what they want as far as discussions of esoteric Freemasonry. And I think that's important.
I know we had talked about talking about this more in the process of this program. You know, it's interesting you saying that in the picture that it creates in my head that may actually warrant a whole nother discussion in the sense of how those two have evolved. You know, as processes go, it seems like that may be or is an avenue of either growth or just of communication and outreach in the sense of the vehicles that are speaking to those groups. Because you're right, there exists separate lives, one above the other, you know, like layers to a cake that touch upon one another and at the same time ignore one another. And I'm wondering that may be something interesting to explore at some point.
Yes, definitely. We could have a show just about that. And I agree with everything you've both said. I think the internet Freemasons, as I'm going to label them here, they are hungry and they are seeking, they are learning, and they really care about the institution. So ideally, the internet activities would supplement their lodge life. But I agree that what we're seeing is a split.
Yep. And the last thing that I'd like to touch upon before we depart is the decline in membership and how Grand Lodges are destroying Freemasonry. As I mentioned before, they have too much power, and they didn't have this power in the 1700s and 1800s. They've accumulated it over a period of time. First of all Freemasonry is local, and that's where it really lives. And the Grand Lodges can do whatever they want to do, but they're not the people behind really how Freemasonry does. The Grand Lodges are taking more and more money from local lodges, leaving them less and less money to do what they could do, would be available to them. There are too many rules and regulations that Grand Lodges have on their books, and they stifle creativity. Grand Lodges are micromanaging Freemasonry, and they're not staying current with the information age. They're always one step behind. The people that are staying current and are with the new generations, okay, the current and upcoming generations are the people that are on internet Freemasonry and the people that are connected to the information age. Lodges and Grand Lodges are lagging behind. They're always one step behind, and they're killing themselves in so doing, and they're lacking the creativity that brings us forward into the present age that everybody else is experiencing.
Hopefully the lessons learned from this internet activity will bleed into the Grand Lodge structure. Were you going to say something, Greg?
I was just going to add to that and just say, you know, again, just like the other topics that we just touched on a few minutes ago, I mean, these are all great things to go into a greater length. impossible to encapsulate with any sort of analysis, and let alone any answer in the span of a couple of minutes. But I think this is a theme that has been current, that we both have explored and talked about and pondered over and navel gazed at, and certainly something that's worthy of conversation, given that we both have had experiences with these. So I would definitely say to keep that in mind, and to come back at it at some point to explore more. I think that would be.
I can't leave without mentioning my mentors.
Okay.
And a lot of people that have helped me along this journey we call Freemasonry. And it's a never-ending journey, and it's always a learning experience. And I would mention Stephen Defoe, who guided me a lot in my writings and took me under his wing. I would mention David Letellier, the president of Freemasonry, who brought me on as executive director and has worked with me hand in hand. And I would mention our current guest co-host, Greg Stewart, who is always here to help me out, technology, advice, all sorts of things, and who is a distinguished writer on his own and a graphic artist. And you ought to also explore freemasoninformation.com. It's a great site.
Well, anybody who's watching, I definitely recommend you pay a visit. I've been playing with video too, so
awesome.
This fits right in line.
Awesome. Well, that's all we have for you this time.
Fantastic. Well, this was Greg Stewart
and Elena Llamas.
Partying on the Square.
Pots.